to NATO, saying that they felt threatened by the capitalist countries joining together. They wanted to be able to have some type of defense. You guys also mentioned here the buffer zone. Um, so you guys did a really good job in those responses. So thank you for being clear in that. Today, what we're going to talk about is the fall of the USSR and kind of what that looked like. But let's go ahead and take a look at a map. Let me pull it up so I can share my screen with you. All right, everyone should see a map. If you look at the packet, you will see it as well. All right, what is this map showing us? What is this map showing us? Go ahead and take a look at it. I see some people with their hands raised. Let's see. All right, I'll start with Hassan.
Okay, so I can see that this is showing the territories of the neutral states, the war pact states, and the NATO states.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, right? So we're seeing NATO, and we know that's the alliance led by the United States. We see the Warsaw Pact, and we understand why those things were created. Now, what would happen, answering this question down here at the bottom, which you should be able to see on your screens, how the Soviet Union's collapse, right? If the Soviet Union somehow fell, right? What type of impact might that have on the Warsaw Pact and so those other nations? I'm going to call on Jalen. Go ahead. Are you muted? Hold on, let me see. I can't unmute you. I'm not sure why. Emma, can you share out what might happen to the Warsaw Pact if the Soviet Union fell?
Well, we can say that.
Right, this is their alliance, but we also know that the Soviet Union has a lot of control over them. So, what could potentially happen if the Soviet Union itself failed?
We can say.
Do you think the Warsaw Pact would still be a thing?
No.
No, why not?
Because
You're a little confused. Michelle, what do you think?
I think that the Soviet Union impacts the members of the Warsaw Pact because they were like kind of the leaders of the Warsaw Pact. So like if they leave, then the whole entire thing ends and it all collapses.
So we can think about that tension that would create, and the spoil that it could potentially create in their relationship. We're going to go ahead and read this first text, and this is going to get into what actually made the Soviet Union weak. So as we're reading, be prepared to share out. This will be a lot of discussion based, so be prepared to look for at least 1 to 2 challenges, weaknesses of the Soviet Union. Darely, what are we looking for as we read?
You said weaknesses. I couldn't hear the first part.
Yeah, 1 to 2 challenges or weaknesses of the Soviet Union during this time. All right, so everyone should be looking for that as we're reading through. I'm going to have Marcus. Can you put the comb down, please, and begin reading? Thank you. Go ahead and read the first 2 paragraphs. Again, every single person be prepared to share out a weakness or a challenge. Go ahead.
The Soviet Union weakens. Western fears of growing society power did not come true. In fact, Soviet communism was doomed. Signs of the weakness of the Soviet system had in fact been visible from the beginning. Stalin's Soviet Union emerged from World War II as a superpower with an Eastern European sphere of influence stretching from the Baltic to the Balkans. Victory, however, brought few rewards to the Soviet people. Stalin continued to fill forced labor camps with enemies of the state. Under Stalin's successor, Nikita Khrushchev, Soviets enjoyed greater freedom of speech. Some government critics were freed from prisoners and labor camps. Khrushchev oversaw a shift in economic priorities away from heavy industry and toward the production of consumer goods. But Khrushchev remained firmly committed to a command economy. The thought in Moscow inspired some East Europeans to move toward greater independence. However, Khrushchev himself remained a determined Cold Warrior. When Hungarians tried to break free of Soviet control in 1956, Khrushchev sent tanks in to enforce obedience, and his successor, Leonid Brezhnev, did the same thing when Shez challenged the Soviets in the Prague Spring of
The Prague Spring.
1968.
Yeah, so if I'm going to lead by example, one of the causes that I found, or one of the challenges that they face, is that in the last kind of few sentences, it talks about how Eastern Europeans tried to start gaining their independence. So that means they're starting to move away from the Warsaw Pact. And that is already weakening the Soviet Union. So when I'm saying look for some of these problems that they're facing or challenges, that's what I mean. I had Shakaya volunteer. Can't find her at the moment. Shakaya, you can read the next paragraph.
The Soviet Union rebuilt its shattered industries after World War II, using equipment and technology launching Sputnik 1, the first artificial satellite in 1957, yet the Soviet economy faced severe problems. Collectivized agriculture remained so unproductive that Russia, a grain exporter in Tsarist times, had to import grain to feed its people. The Soviet command economy could not match Western market economies in producing consumer goods. Soviet shoes and television sets were far inferior, while such luxuries as clothes washers, or automobiles remained rare.
Yeah, I'm gonna have Hassan read the next one, but before I do, I want you to go back into that paragraph and identify at least one challenge, right, or one problem that the Soviet Union faced. One weakness, one challenge, one problem. There was a lot mentioned in that paragraph, so I want to give you a second to be able to identify it. Be prepared to shout after the text. I see some of you looking back. Alexis is looking back. So is Racine and I. Okay. Hassan, last paragraph, please.
Central economic planning led to inefficiency and waste. A huge bureaucracy decided what and how much to produce. Government planners in Moscow, however, knew little about local needs. They chose to produce many unneeded goods. Consumers' needs often were not met. Although workers were paid low wages, lifetime job security gave them little incentive to produce better quality goods. Unlike the economies of Western Europe and the United States, which experienced booms during the Cold War, the economies of Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union stagnated. People saw little improvement in their standards of living and envied the prosperity of the West. Soviet economic inferiority made it impossible for the Soviet Union to keep up with the United States in the arms race and in military preparedness.
Excellent. All right, I'm going to give you another 30 seconds. I want you to go back and identify at least one other challenge or weakness that the Soviet Union had in that paragraph. And then we're going to share out the different problems and challenges that we saw. So looking back in that last paragraph, were there any issues or challenges facing the Soviet Union that would cause it to fall? All right, I'm going to start with Jamie.
I was going to say what?
Huh?
What?
You were going to say what?
I was going to say, what does the packet look like? Because I don't think I have that packet.
It's okay. I sent the link in your chat, but you can just use what I'm sharing on the screen so that you can see it. I'll come back to you, Jamie. Look for on the text here. Look for a challenge that the Soviet Union faced. Racine, name one challenge or weakness of the USSR.
I think one challenge is that they struggled in meeting up with how good the other side the Western powers were, especially like how do I say this, like they didn't have like high quality goods and stuff.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Hassan.
Also in the last sentence it says Soviet economic inferiority made it impossible for the Soviet Union to keep up with the United States in the arms race and in military preparedness.
Excellent. Alexis, did you see any other challenges or weaknesses?
The Western market economies had trouble like producing consumer goods for citizens.
Well, it wasn't the Western economies, right? It was actually the Soviet economies in comparison to the Western economies who were unable to produce. So we see that this command economy that the Soviet Union had during this time was a major part of its downfall. And we're looking at this question here. It says, how can a command economy lead to issues in an economy like that? And so we're thinking they're not even able to meet the basic needs of like consumer goods. What is a consumer good? We talked a lot about this in Unit 3 during the Roaring Twenties. What is a consumer good? Girlies?
Can you repeat that?
What's a consumer good?
A consumer good is the it's the goods that we, I don't know how to.
No, go ahead. You're on the right track.
It's the goods that we, I think it's the goods that we produce.
No, the opposite, right? So a consumer, let's see who else. Hassan.
We could tell, well, based off of Unit 3, it went from war goods, which was for the soldiers, to consumer goods, which was for the people who buy on the market or on.
Yeah, so consumer is obviously the producer, Darely. So the producers are the ones making things. Consumer goods would be things that regular people and everyday people kind of need and buy on the regular, right? So things like shoes, that would be a consumer good, all the way to things like microwaves and not being able to provide those necessities for those people. That was a major kind of issue here. Okay. We're going to just continue moving on here. We're going to continue to think about some other issues that the Soviet Union faced. We're going to get through this pretty quickly, and so hopefully we'll have time to start the homework in class. Can I have, who have I not heard from? Jolie, can you read the first paragraph of the Soviet Union in Afghanistan?
Yeah. In 1979, the Soviet Union became involved in a long war in Afghanistan, an Islamic country just south of the Soviet Union. A Soviet-supported Afghan government had tried to modernize the nation. Its policies included social reforms and land redistribution that would reduce the power of regional landlords. Afghanistan landlords who commanded armed men as warlords, and Muslim conservatives charged that both policies threatened Muslim tradition. When these warlords took up arms against the government, Soviet troops moved in.
Excellent. And then can I have Amira?
I couldn't hear Jolie's, so I don't know what paragraph she was on.
Second paragraph.
Oh. Wait, the one that starts with under Stalin system?
No, we're Soviet Union in Afghanistan. Soviet Union, the second paragraph there.
Oh, okay. Battling Mujahideen, or Muslim religious warriors in the mountains of Afghanistan, however, proved as difficult as fighting guerrillas in the jungles of Vietnam have been for Americans. By the mid 1980s, the American government began to smuggle modern weaponry to the Mujahideen. The Soviet had years of heavy casualties, high costs, and few successes. Like America's Vietnam War, the struggle in Afghanistan provoked a crisis in morale for the Soviets at home.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. All right. So based on this, like I said, a lot of this will be discussion space. What was the goal of Soviet Union in Afghanistan? What did the Soviet Union want to do in Afghanistan? Like, why were they even there? Let's hear from Josh.
Oh, oh,
What was the
can
goal?
you hear me?
Yes. What was the goal of the Soviet Union in Afghanistan?
Okay. It says, I think the Soviets wanted to modernize the nation.
Yes. Right. They did want to modernize it. They also just added on there, Hassan.
They also wanted to make sure that it didn't gain power and to spread their beliefs onto them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And lastly, thinking about trying to set up this pro-Soviet government, so that a government that is in support of them. And why did the U.S. get involved at all? At this point, why did the U.S. get involved, Rachel? Or how does the U.S. get involved?
As it says in the text, it says in 1979 the Soviet Union became involved. Oh shoot! Wait, no, I lost my code.
How did the U.S. get involved in this conflict? If you need to take a second to reread, that's fine. We have a little bit of time here. Rachel, I'm going to come back to you. Be prepared to share out. Omar, how did the U.S. get involved, or why did the U.S. get involved?
The U.S. got involved with I didn't even get the packet. I don't have packet. I don't have the packet. So.
It's not on your screen?
No.
No. Give me a thumbs up if you can see the text on your screen. About half of you can. Okay, Vincent, can I have you share out since you can see? How did the U.S. get involved?
The U.S. secretly sent modern weaponry.
Where is it?
Right, so one more time, Vincent.
The U.S. secretly sent modern weaponry to the people in Afghanistan.
Excellent. So the U.S., how could that potentially backfire? Is there any way that could kind of backfire? Thinking about this question, I'll show you guys in just a moment. Let me scroll down. Right. How could the U.S. arming the Mujahideen, right, potentially backfire against them, especially for those of you that can see? Carlos.
So this could backfire. Well, we know that the communists they're really okay. So one this can backfire because this can end up causing a lot of more conflict, which can involve more wars. Or a big war, because we know that if the communists and the U.S. went to war, this is really bad. And if they think this as a wrong reason, or they think it's in a wrong way, then this could backfire on their whole operation and just backfire on them big time.
Also, if the Soviet Union finds out, then they could take that as they might take it in a bad way, like Carlos said, and they might actually start a whole another war, which the U.S. definitely doesn't want to start.
Excellent. All right, what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna have you guys all chat me a response to this question, right? Would you characterize the Soviet Union's efforts? And I'm gonna show the screen in just a moment, but you should see the question here. Would you characterize the Soviet Union's efforts in Afghanistan as a success or failure, and why? So let me go ahead and chat this to you guys so you can send me back your responses before we move on to the homework. I'm going to scroll back up to this text so that you all can see. I need a response from everyone. I'm seeing the started answers, but let's make sure it's thorough. Let me actually give you a reminder. I'm going to give 3 minutes just for the slower typers. Yes, Jamie. Thank you, Hassan. Once I have your response, I'm actually going to respond to you personally with the link to tonight's homework. Omar, thank you. Amari, explain why, please. Thank you, Thierno. Take another minute and a half. Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Racine. Thank you, Jalen. Thank you, Sanai. Thank you, Jorelli. Thank you, Sienna. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Carlos. Okay, really great job. I'm just gonna go over some of these answers that I'm seeing here. A lot of you are saying that it was a failure, right? Because eventually they got defeated. I see it was a failure because it kind of worsened the problems that they already had at home, especially with the economy. Also because the U.S. got involved, how it eventually led to their downfall. I see it was a failure because a lot of things that occurred was very negative for them. For example, this war helped to ruin the morale at home. It also caused casualties and it hurt the military. I see, sorry about the timer. I see that it started off as a war which gave off bad effects. I would characterize the efforts as a failure because they struggled the Soviets years of heavy casualties, high losses, few successes like America in Vietnam. which crushed the morale there. And lastly, I see a lot of comparisons here to the Vietnam War, and then continue with the casualties. So thank you for being thoughtful in those responses. Let me see. Just a second. Oh, we're doing good on time, actually. All right, because we're doing good on time, part of the homework was actually to watch a video about the downfall of the Soviet Union. I actually think it'll be helpful if we can just watch the video together. That way you don't have to watch the video on your own. You can just go straight into responding to the question. The homework question, I'm going to post the link here in the chat so we can watch the video together, and then you can get started on the question itself. So the question is asking us, well, at least the second question is, what do you think the biggest cause of the fall of the USSR was? And in order to prepare us for that, I'm going to have us watch the video together because we have quite a bit of time left. So give me one moment so I can pull this video up, and then we can work on all of that together. Sorry, I'm having a typo. Don't worry about it, Amira. I'm going to show you it. We'll work on it. I'll show the video now so that you can see. Just 30 more seconds to get this settled. Okay. I'm going to do a new share right here. Oops. This should be able to hear the sound. Let me put it in full screen so that, oh, it says it's unavailable. No. All right, here we go.
Today's episode is sponsored by Audible. Get a free audiobook with a 30-day trial today by signing up at audible.com/infographics. Go to audible.com/infographics.
Can I have a thumbs up if you can hear the video? Okay, great.
Graphics or text infographics to 501. Soviet President to get started. Christmas Day, 1991. Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev announced, "We are living in a new world." And with these 7 words, the Soviet Union was dissolved and Gorbachev stepped down from his post. After 40 years of the Cold War and the threat of a nuclear holocaust, the world's largest communist state broke up into 15 independent republics, meaning the USA was now handed the accolade of New World Superpower. At its strongest, the Soviet Union had over 5 million soldiers stationed around the world, and they all stepped down without a shot being fired under the new regime. Today, we will explore exactly.
I see that Sienna is actually taking notes as she's watching the video, which is helpful because this is going to help you with the homework. It hasn't quite gotten into the reasons yet, but it will very, very soon.
What came to pass in this episode of the Infographic Show. How and why did the Soviet Union collapse? In the late 1980s, the Soviet Union appeared to be somewhat of a powerhouse, exhibiting a rigid recovery from the invasion of Afghanistan and with an economy that appeared to be performing well. The Union appeared from the surface as powerful as it was back in the 1950s. But looks can be deceiving. Beneath the facade, the Soviet Union was splitting apart, and it had been happening for decades. Although there were many factors at play, some reasons were as follows. Mikhail Gorbachev rose to power in 1985 with plans to reform the nation with a hybrid communist capitalist system similar to modern-day China. He also planned to ease restrictions on freedom of speech and religion. Before this, millions of Soviets were arrested for speaking out against the state. However, his plan backfired as he discovered that the loosening of control over the people and reforming political restrictions meant the people used their newfound powers to critique the government until they eventually succeeded in pushing for reform. This brand of communism had operated historically on tight central control. The loosening of control led to the abandonment of the entire construct.
Right. So we're already going through some of the problems and thinking about the control that the Soviet Union had over its satellite states, but as they tried to give out more freedoms, which we'll talk a little bit about more tomorrow, right, this kind of led to the entire kind of system of their control starting to fall apart. Right, so that's some of the reasons there. I'm going to continue playing it so we can hear the rest of the reasons.
Back in the days of Vladimir Lenin, Leon Trotsky, and Joseph Stalin, the Soviets were led with strong ideological beliefs tied to Marxism. By the 1960s, the radical policies of the past leaders were abandoned in favor of a more conservative approach. By the 1970s, the Soviet people noticed the rise of the political elite who lived in posh homes, ate in fancy restaurants, and spent their vacations at luxury ski resorts, while millions of average Joes died from starvation.
Right, so we're seeing inequalities in the social structure. So you have millions of people suffering and the, riches and luxuries being in the hands of a few. I see that Amira is taking notes. Again, this is all going to be helpful for you. You may have to rewatch it for homework. Everyone should be taking notes during this time to help you out.
Younger generations were less keen to toe the line as their parents had and were willing to step forward and protest for change. These newer generations were more in tune with world events and slowly but surely began to pull at the strands of the political regime. Cold War tensions with the United States rose in the 70s and 80s, and with Ronald Reagan's leadership and the resulting increase in military spending, it seemed that the US had won the nuclear standoff. The Strategic Defense Initiative, or SDI, claimed to be able to blast Russian missiles as they fell, meaning, in theory, the US could win the long-running battle of wits. Reagan also managed to isolate the Soviets from the rest of the world economy, and without export sales in oil, the Soviet economy was severely weakened and limited. The Soviets were unable to turn a corner, and in the 1980s, breadlines were commonplace as poverty soared. Many people didn't have basic clothing or shoes, and under these conditions, it is only a matter.
Some of these things were talked about in our text as well, right? That the Soviet Union, under its command economy, was unable to provide the basic consumer goods, such as shoes.
Of time before the people call out for regime change. And then there is the nation's structure itself. When you have 15 radically different republics under one flag with different ethnicities, cultures, and languages, there are bound to be inherent tensions. 1989 nationalist movements brought about regime change in Poland and Czechoslovakia as the Soviet satellite nations began to split away. As these nations began to pull away, the central apparatus was weakened until it finally collapsed. Due to all these factors, by 1991, the Soviet Union was unable to maintain a normal functioning economy and run a huge military simultaneously. Gorbachev, unwilling to go to war like his predecessors Lenin and Stalin might have done, instead pulled the plug on the military, and the 15 republics went their separate ways. Although a devoted Marxist, Gorbachev was an independent thinker who respected the need for reform and planned a restructuring of the economy. This, along with his vision to lessen the control held by central government and a move towards uncensored media, laid the path for total reform. The seeds were planted, and the Soviet Union was no more. So today we looked at the downfall of the Soviet Union. But if you want to know more about specific stories,
Before we close out, I'm going to have a few of you share main takeaways here. What were some of the issues that led to the fall of the Soviet Union that we just saw in this? I'm just going to cold call on some of you because there are so many there that were mentioned. Amari?
So one reason was that the Soviet Union couldn't provide basic consumer goods for their citizens.
Excellent. Thank you. Theano?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah,
Theano? Okay, hold on one second. Emma?
There was inequalities in the social structure.
There were inequalities in the social structure. Thank you. Racine?
Oh, I didn't raise my hand.
I know.
What do you call it? Okay, so.
Any problem that we saw or read about?
Some problems that we saw is that the citizens were not given enough power over the government, and they were protesting about that.
I'm not sure what you mean by power over the government, but we did see a lot of problems.
Power as if they don't have, they have a voice, they don't get shut down.
Excellent, right? So it's thinking about repressing any people that disagree or suppressing any people that disagree with the government. Omar?
Another problem was that there was many ethnicities in the place, because as you see, when they broke up, there's like 15 different republics. and
Mhm.
all those different republics had different cultures and languages.
Excellent, sir.
Another one, I guess, I don't know, maybe the nuclear war, or the quote unquote nuclear war in the two that United won.
Mhm. Yeah, right. And when we talk about the Cuban Missile Crisis, it seemed like the U.S. had won out of that episode. So in many ways, besides them putting the satellites in space, it's like the U.S. won the space race. The U.S. kind of won this nuclear arms race, and so all of these things are contributing to the decline and the fall of the Soviet Union. You guys did a great job with that. Everyone should have the link. We're going to use these last few minutes. We have 4 minutes to go ahead and get started on that. You are going to have to respond to the two questions there. I'm going to send it one more time. And in these last 3 minutes, you're going to go ahead and get started on that. Please message me, chat me if you have any questions. It should be very straightforward based on what we read and watched today. Let me set a timer for you. Two more minutes. Amar, are you working on your homework? Thank you for your focus. About a minute left before we close out. Thirty seconds. Finish as much as you can. All right. I want to thank you guys for just being engaged in that. Our main takeaways are thinking about, well, we know that we're in this tense struggle between the U.S. and the Soviet Union in the midst of the Cold War, but how these internal struggles and the inability to keep control over the Warsaw Pact really led to this decline of the Soviet Union. Make sure you explore those causes in your homework. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. Carlos, can you actually expand on this during the break? I just want to talk to you really quickly. Everyone knows. You guys can go ahead and close out and have a good break. Bye. Oh.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You haven't been answering my calls.
Oh yeah. Well, I have to talk to you about that because my phone. My mom takes away my phone every night.
Okay.
And she gives it back to me when my dad leaves from work. So that's on the second break at lunchtime.
Okay.
So,
But when
yeah.
I text you, you can just respond later. You know that, right?
Oh.
Not leave me
Oh
on
yeah, I
red.
forgot.
You can not leave me on the red.
Sorry.
I'd appreciate it if you say, I'm doing fine, Miss EJ. I'm alive and well.
Sorry.
Is everything
It's
okay?
been well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you able to do like your homework and your classes or having any trouble with technology?
Yeah. I've been doing my homework like well. It's been easy pretty much because I just have to use my